Hello students. In our last session we studied about the principle and theory of flame photometry. In today's session we are going to study about the instrumentation part of flame photometry. So as already discussed, flame photometry is a type of emission spectroscopy which can be used for qualitative and quantitative analysis of the metals, particularly metals of group 1 and group 2. So let us now see the instrumentation. You can see in the diagram various parts of the instrument. So starting from sample, then comes atomizer and mixing chamber, then burner. The function of burner is to produce flame. So for this we are having compressed air supply and compressed fuel supply. After flame comes our optical system which consists of lens and filter, then our photo detector, then amplifier, and finally our LCD display. So this is the block diagram to make it simpler. So you can see here sample is fed into the flame excitation unit, then the radiation passes through filter, then detector, amplifier and recorder. So now let us see one by one all the parts. So first is the types of burner. So function of the burner is to produce flame, and the flame used in flame photometer must have the following functions, like it should have ability to evaporate the liquid droplets from the sample and convert it into solid residue and subsequently to atoms. The flame should have capability to excite atoms and cause them to emit radiant energy. For analytical purposes, the emission intensity should be steady over a reasonable period of time, that is 1 to 2 minutes. Temperature of the flame is controlled by the type of fuel and oxidant, oxidant and fuel to oxidant ratio, type of solvent for preparing the sample solution, amount of solvent which enters into the flame, and the type of burner employed in flame photometer. So all these factors are necessary to control the temperature of the flame. Also, the particular region in flame which is to be focused into the entrance slit of the spectral isolation unit, it will also it is also important for the temperature which is desired, because each and every region of the flame will have different temperatures. So for this we will see the zones of flame. So as shown in diagram, you can see preheating zone, primary zone, interconal zone and secondary reaction zone. The zone which is useful to us is interconal zone. So usually this zone is allowed to pass through our system. We will see all the zones one by one. So preheating zone, here combustion mixture is heated to the ignition temperature by thermal conduction from the primary reaction zone. Primary reaction zone, it is about 0.1 millimeter thick at atmospheric pressure. There is no thermodynamic equilibrium in this zone and the concentration of ions and free radicals is very high. So this region cannot be used for flame photometry. Interconal zone. Now this zone can extend to a considerable height. Here the maximum temperature is achieved just above the tip of the inner zone, and this zone is used for flame photometry. Secondary reaction zone. Here the products of combustion processes are burned to stable molecular species by the surrounding air. Okay, so now let us have a look at our first burner, that is Mecher burner. The diagram is shown here. So this burner was used earlier. It employed natural gas and oxygen. It produces low temperature and low excitation energies, so used for alkali metals only. Limitations: the flame produced is not homogeneous chemically, that is, oxidizing region and reducing region appear in the flame. The process leading to atomic excitation in the flame differ in oxidizing and reducing regions in flame. Different concentration of excited atoms are obtained in this region, so this produces a non-uniformity. For this reason, it is not used now. Next is total consumption burner. So as you can see in the diagram, there is a capillary tube through which the sample enters, surrounded by the oxidant and fuel. Fuel used is hydrogen, oxidant is oxygen. Liquid sample is drawn into the flame. From the side tubings as shown in the diagram, hydrogen and oxygen enter and both are burned at the top of the burner to produce a flame. Now as soon as liquid sample is drawn into the base of flame, the oxygen aspirates the sample solution, leaving a solid residue followed by atomization and excitation. Flame produced is noisy and turbulent, but this can be adjusted to produce high temperature by proper control of fuel to oxidant ratio. Also, the total consumption burner has now been replaced by other burners because flame produced is noisy and turbulent. Now, as you can see that all the sample that enters the capillary tube will enter the flame regardless of the droplet size, be it larger droplets or smaller droplets, hence the name total consumption burner. Next burner is premix or laminar flow burner. So as shown in the diagram, this burner uses mixing baffles and you can see that there is a longer path length for the sample to reach the flame. Here aspirated sample, fuel and oxidant are thoroughly mixed before reaching the burner opening and entering the flame. Gases move in non-turbulent fashion, that is in a laminar pattern, hence the name laminar flow burner. Only small portion, that is about 5% of the sample in form of small droplets, reaches the flame and is efficiently atomized. Larger droplets from the aspirator impinge on the side of the spray chamber and are drained off. So as shown, only small portion, that is smaller droplets, will reach the flame. Larger droplets, they are drained off or drained away. So advantages are that flame produces non-turbulent, noiseless as well as stable. Efficient atomization of the sample takes place because the sample has long path length to reach the flame, and also it is mixed properly before actually reaching the flame. Solutions up to several percent can be handled without clogging. Now only small droplets reach the flame, so there are no chances of clogging due to larger droplets. Disadvantage: now whenever the sample contains two solvent, the more volatile solvent will evaporate in the spray chamber and less volatile component will remain undissociated. The smaller number of items will reach the flame, resulting in reduced emission intensity, giving incorrect results. Next burner is Lundergraf burner. The diagram is shown here. So you can see its part: nebulizer, then oxidant and fuel are fed here. Auxiliary oxidant is also added. And finally the burner head. You can see some pressure vents. Liquid sample is aspirated into the spray chamber. Small droplets and vaporized sample is swept into the base of the flame in form of a cloud, while large droplets condense on the side and drain away. So just as seen in our previous burner, larger droplets here are also drained away. Advantage is it produces no noise. Disadvantage: only 5% of the sample reaches the flame, so there is too much loss of sample. Also here also, if there are two solvents, one is more volatile and another is less volatile, then it will again pose problem as discussed in our previous burner. Next is shielded burner. So here the flame is shielded from the ambient atmosphere by the stream of inert gas. This will help to produce a quieter flame and it will give us better analytical sensitivity. Next is nitrous oxide acetylene flames. These flames are superior to other flames for effectively producing free atoms. Metals with very reflective oxides such as aluminium and titanium can be analyzed using this flame because this flame will provide higher temperature, and the metals like aluminium, titanium, they also require higher temperature for atomization and to break their refractive oxides. Drawback is high temperature reduces its usefulness for the determination of alkali metals as they are easily ionized. Intense background emission makes the measurement of metal emission difficult. So these are the drawbacks. Alkali metals generally require lower temperatures. In high temperature they get ionized, that is from atoms they get converted to ions, which is not useful for this technique. Thus it is difficult to analyze alkali metals using this flame. And also this flame gives a high intense background emission which will produce interferences. Okay, so this was about the burner. Next is the optical system. So optical system consists of mirror, lens and filter. Mirror helps to transmit the light emitted from the atoms and focus the emissions to the lens. Convex lens helps to focus the light on the slit. Filter isolates the wavelength to be measured from that of any other extraneous emissions. So let us now look at all the parts one by one. First is mirror. So radiation from the flame is emitted in all directions, which results in the loss of radiation and hence the loss of signal. So to maximize the amount of radiation, mirror is located behind the burner to reflect the radiation back to the entrance slit of the monochromator. So this will prevent the loss of radiation because radiation will be reflected by the mirror to the entrance slit of monochromator. Mirror used is concave. It covers a wide angle from the flame and it reflects the hottest and steadiest part of the flame onto the entrance slit. So this will help to reduce the flame flicker from the upper parts of the flame where light intensity is reduced and noise is increased. Reflecting surface of the mirror is front faced. They are easily susceptible to damage and chemical attack. Therefore, instruments should be kept away from the corrosive atmosphere. Now see here, reflecting surface of the mirror is front face. Generally the mirror which is used in households, the reflecting surface is not front faced, it is behind. So in this mirror which is used in the flame photometry, reflecting surface is front faced. Next part is slits. So entrance and exit slits are used before and after the dispersion elements. Entrance slit will allow only the focus flame to enter. Exit slit is placed after the monochromator and it allows only the selected wavelength to pass through the detector. The slit must prevent interfering lines, that is emission lines from other components in the flame having similar wavelength to those of emission lines of the elements being determined. Next part is monochromators. Monochromators, they convert the polychromatic light into monochromatic. Monochromator is generally prism which is made up of quartz. In expensive models or expensive instruments, instead of prism, grating monochromators are used. You know, grating is a series of parallel straight lines which is cut into a plane surface. Next are the filters. In some elements, emission spectrum contains a few lines. So in such cases, the optical filter may be used in place of the slit and monochromator system, but only if the emission spectrum contains a few lines. Filter is made from the material which is transparent over a narrow spectral range. Filter allows only the desired wavelength to pass through the detector. So undesired wavelength is absorbed by the filter. Now different filters are available based on the items to be detected like sodium, calcium, magnesium, potassium, lithium. So for example, if you are using sodium filter, so it will allow only the lines corresponding to sodium to pass through and not other. Detectors. Now let us have a look at the detectors. It converts the light energy into electrical signals. The radiation coming from the optical system is allowed to fall on the detector, which measures the intensity of radiation falling on it. It should be sensitive to radiation of all wavelength that may be examined. Now, basically three types of detectors are used. First is photomultiplier tube, next is photoemissive cell, photovoltaic cell. Now from all these three detector which is most widely used is photomultiplier tube. So you can have a look at the diagram here. It consists of a photocathode, then diodes and then anode. So it consists of an evacuated tube which contains one photocathode and 9 to 16 electrodes which are known as diodes. Diodes, these are the electrodes in a vacuum tube which serve as an electron multiplier through secondary emission. The surface of diode is beryllium copper, cesium tin or any similar material. Photocathode surface is of alkali or alkali metal oxide. Diode D1 is maintained at a voltage 90 volt more positive than the cathode and electrons are accelerated towards it as a result. So diode D2 is 90 volt more positive than diode D1. Again D3 will be more positive as compared to D2. Thus this will help the electrons to accelerate. Working. So when the radiation strikes the photosensitive cathode, it gives rise to the photoelectrons by photoelectric effect. Diode D1 is more positive as compared to the photocathode. Thus, electrons emitted by the cathode are attracted to the first diode D1 and accelerated in the field. Each electron striking diode D1 will thus give rise to 2 to 4 secondary electrons which will be attracted to diode D2 which is again positive with respect to diode D1. By the time this process has been repeated 9 times, 10 raised to 6 to 10 raised to 7 electrons have been formed from each incident photon. This cascade of electrons is finally collected at the anode and resulting current is then converted to voltage and measured. Photoemissive cell, next detector. You can see the diagram. It consists of a cathode which is like a concave cup, then anode in the form of the wire. So it consists of an evacuated tube which contains one semi-cylindrical photocathode of metal, anode in the form of wire. The concave surface of the cathode, it supports a layer of photoemissive material which emits electrons when irradiated with the light of suitable energy. Let us see its working. The radiation striking the semi-cylindrical photosensitive cathode give rise to the photoelectrons by photoelectric effect. These are attracted and collected by an anode. The current which is created between the cathode and anode is regarded as a measure of radiation falling on the detector. let us have a look at the term photoelectric effect. It is the emission of electrons when electromagnetic radiation hits a material. Okay, so these electrons are attracted and collected by the anode, and this will give rise to the current, which can be measured by the detector. Next is photovoltaic cell. So as shown in the diagram, it has a thin metallic layer coated with silver or gold, which acts as electrode. Then there is also a metal base plate which acts as another electrode. Two layers are separated by semiconductor layer of selenium when light radiation falls on the selenium layer. This will create potential difference between the two electrode and cause flow of current. Okay, so this was about various detectors. Now let us have a look on the effect of solvent in flame photometry. Now, solvent used in the sample affects the signal in two ways. First, viscosity controls the rate at which sample is aspirated into the flame. If the flow rate is too high, flame is swamped and the signal drops off. And if the flow rate is too low, signal is decreased due to insufficient sample. Therefore, optimum flow rate is important. Second effect of the solvent is caused by difference between the aqueous or organic material. Now, if it is aqueous, then the sample require more energy to evaporate it. And if the solvent is organic, organic solvents are generally volatile. Okay, so they will take less time as compared to the aqueous one. So, for organic solvents, atomization efficiency increases and there is enhancement of signal as compared to the aqueous. Thus, whether the solvent is aqueous or organic, this will also have effect. Let us now have a look on instruments. So, first type of instrument, you can see in the diagram, the burner used is total consumption or premix burner. With premix burner having a long flame path, mirrors are omitted. So if the flame path is long, mirrors are not required. If the path length is short, mirror will be required. Sample solution is sucked by the atomizer, then sample is aspirated into the flame in the form of fine spray. Spectral emission then comes from the excited atoms. Emitted radiation is collected by a collimating concave mirror from the flame and is then allowed to pass through a prism and slit. Then radiation of appropriately selected wavelength strikes a photodetector, the magnitude of the electrical signal developed on a readout meter. Temperature of the flame can be adjusted by controlling the flow rate and ratio of fuel to oxidant. This can be done by introducing pressure regulators and flow meters in gas line. So this is the first type of instrument. Next is second type, or you can say internal standard flame photometer. So you can see here that the internal standard is used. In this type of flame photometer, the effects of momentary fluctuations which are caused by fluctuations in fuel or oxidant pressure can be removed. Lithium is generally used as an internal standard. Now, equal concentration of lithium is added to the standard and sample solutions. The sample solution containing the internal standard is sucked by the atomizer operated by one of the flame producing gases and as fine spray is fed into the flame. Emitted radiation is collected by the mirror through a filter. Now, this emitted radiation, it arises from the two parts. That is, one part arises due to lithium and second part arises due to the presence of element to be measured. We have added lithium as the internal standard. So one part of the emitted radiation will be due to lithium. And second part, it will be due to our analyte. Now both these parts are received by the separate amplifiers and are then fed to the common detecting system, which records the intensity of element to that of internal. So here the intensity will be recorded in the form of the ratio, intensity of the element to that of internal. Okay, so these were the two types of instrument, first type and second type. In second type, we use internal standard, which is generally lithium. Now let us have a look on the applications of flame photometry. It can be used for qualitative analysis, that is to find out which metal is present. For quantitative, that is how much amount. Simultaneous multi-element analysis, that is more than one element can be detected at a time, and some other applications. So let us have a look one by one. Qualitative analysis, so it is used to detect elements of group 1 and 2, that is alkali metals and alkaline earth metals. So group 1 include lithium, sodium, potassium, rubidium, cesium, francium. Group 2 include beryllium, magnesium, then calcium, strontium, barium and radium. Now, some of these elements can be detected even visually by the color in the flame. For example, sodium will give yellow color in the flame. Potassium, it will give purple color. Okay, but this method is not very reliable. So, what you can do is, instead of just visually detecting, we can use a flame photometer with a filter or monochromator to separate the radiation with the wavelength characteristics of the different metals from the radiations present. So if the radiation of the characteristics wavelength is detected, this will indicate the presence of a metal in the sample. Now suppose we can adjust our filter to sodium. So if we detect the radiation on the detector, then it implies that it is sodium. But but in spite of keeping sodium as the filter, if we do not obtain any emission radiation on the detector, it means that the sample does not contain sodium. Limitations are less reliable than atomic absorption spectroscopy. It does not provide information about the molecular structure of the compound, and non-radiating elements like carbon, hydrogen, halogen cannot be detected. But they can be detected under special circumstances. For example, if the chlorine is to be detected in a liquid sample, it can be precipitated as silver chloride, which is then aspirated into the flame to carry out detection of silver. Now, as silver was combined with chloride to give silver chloride, and from this silver chloride we have atomized silver. So, the result of silver will depict the result of chlorine. That is, from the result of silver we can calculate the chloride content. Next application is quantitative analysis. It is the most useful application. It is used for rapid quantitative determination of group 1 and 2. If high optical resolution equipment are used, then other metallic elements apart from group 1 and group 2 can also be determined. So quantitative analysis can be carried out in two ways. First is standard addition method and next is internal standard method. In standard addition method, known amount of a standard solution is added to identical aliquots of the sample and absorbance is measured. Then the unknown is aspirated into the flame. Then a series of solution having unknown plus varying amounts of standard A are prepared and aspirated. So as you can see in the diagram, here you can see x, then x plus a, that is x plus standard, then x plus 2a, that is twice the standard, then 4 times the standard and 6 times the standard. So varying amounts of standard are to be added in our sample. Then the plot is drawn between the signal intensity against concentration of the x and x plus standard a. So by extrapolation from this plot, we can find out the concentration of unknown from the intersection of the curve with concentration axis. So here you can see the dotted line which shows the concentration of X. So thus you can find out the concentration. Advantages is it is useful for determining very low concentrations of the element. Then it compensates for any unexpected interfering material present in the sample solution. It can be used for estimation of elements which are rarely analyzed. Now, while employing this method, a correction should be made for background emission from the flame. So this can be done by injecting the solvent into the flame and then its signal intensity is measured. So this will help to correct the background emission. Next is internal standard method. So here the standard sample solution containing a known amount of internal standard, generally lithium, are prepared. These are aspirated into the flame and their intensities are recorded. Subsequently, sample is aspirated and its intensity is recorded. Now the ratio of the two intensities is calculated and is then plotted against the concentration of element to be determined. Then we will obtain the calibration curve from which we can calculate the concentration of unknown. The internal standard which is to be used, it should be very small in original sample. That is, its amount should be very small in the original sample. Also, it should give an emission line which reacts with the interferences as a line of sample element does. Okay, so what about interferences we will study about in our subsequent sessions. Some other applications are that elemental analysis can be done in various fields. For example, boron has been determined in various types of organic compounds. Now you can see here in various fields, for example, biological fluids and tissues. Okay, so we can find out the metals present in biological fluids and tissues. Then in cement, in soil, that is analysis of soil, which minerals or which elements are present. Then in glass, in metallurgical products, that is products of metal origin, petroleum products, then natural and industrial waste waters. So its composition can be known. Okay, so these were the various applications. So in this session, we have studied about the instrumentation and various instruments of flame photometry, then applications of flame photometry. Thank you.